Everybody loves cartoons. Why is that? I know I have a personal relationship with cartoons. I've been a fan and a practitioner for almost all of my life, primarily at the New Yorker. I want to talk about cartoons today and examine why we love them so much and what they can tell us. And more specifically, how do they relate to history? Because cartoons are cultural history. They tell us how we laugh, why we laugh. They tell us about our biases and our stereotypes. They tell us how we interact with each other. And I want to, the kind of cartoon I'm talking about today is the New Yorker cartoon, because it's what I know and it's what I do. And the New Yorker cartoon has been around for almost a century. It's 86 years old. And plus, if you look at each cartoon individually and as a group, they tell you a lot. They're like mini time capsules of culture. So I'm going to talk about the New Yorker for a little bit first. Oops, and what we like, sorry. I'm going to talk about the New Yorker for a little bit first. It was founded in 1925 by two journalists, Harold Ross and Jane Grant. They happened to be married. And they saw that there was a new demographic happening in New York City. Lots of young people were flooding to the city to find work and to find entertainment. And they wanted to create a new humor magazine that spoke to these people. They wanted to create a new type of cartoon. Harold Ross became the first editor of the magazine, and he wanted to create a new kind of cartoon. And he worked with all the amazing talent that was flooding the city at that time, and created a cartoon that was different than what had been previously done in the magazine. The old cartoons were sort of stiff, illustrated jokes with many lines of captions. So he and the artist came up with a new kind of cartoon, which we now know as the New Yorker cartoon, a pithy, sharp, witty, in-the-know kind of cartoon that said, if you don't understand it, you don't belong. Humor has a way of doing that. Harold Ross is famous for saying that the New Yorker is not for the little old lady of Dubuque. And he meant that, I would imagine, because he really wanted to create a new form. He wanted to speak to a new audience. But I think he also did it for economic reasons. I want to tell you a fun anecdote that I really enjoy, that I learned about a few years ago. In the first few months of the New Yorker in 1925, it wasn't doing well at all. It was not selling. They weren't making any money. And the editors and the backers were walking down the street one day, and they were discussing this. And one of the backers, a man named Hanrahan, said, you can't kill the New Yorker. It's a living thing. And I feel that the New Yorker is like a living thing. And like living things, it has changed a little bit over time. I've been there for 33 years, and I've been through, two owners, Ralph Fleischman, the original owner, and Cy Newhouse now, two cartoon editors, Lee Lorenz and Bob Mankoff, and four editors, senior editors. William Shawn, who came after Harold Ross, and then Bob Gottlieb was there only for a few years, and then Tina Brown, which was a wild ride, that was fun, and then and now David Remnick. So it's changed a lot. I mean, it's changed a little bit, but the essence, the character, the core of the New Yorker has pretty much stayed the same. So what makes a New Yorker cartoon? At its best, it's a dance between word and image. It's much more than the sum of its parts. It's almost like the New Yorker cartoon was multimedia before its time. The cartoonist has to be a writer, an artist, a set designer, a costume designer, and a choreographer. Cartoonists are like anthropologists. We study people. We study how they act, how they behave, what they wear, where they're sitting, where they're going, what's going on in the world. I know that when I sit down to draw every day, I'm exhausted and overwhelmed by, who am I going to draw? What are they going to say? Why are they going to say it? Who are they talking to? Where have they been? And why is it funny? And is it funny to whom? Let's see. So I want to show you some cartoons now. And I had a lot of fun looking through old New Yorkers and old albums that I have trying to select, and it was extremely difficult to select just a few cartoons to show you today. And because there's so many great ones, of course, and they all have nuggets of information to tell you. But I chose some, and I'm probably going to have to read the captions for you. So I'm going to read the captions sort of dryly, and then we'll talk about the cartoons. Now, a lot of cartoons from the New Yorker are about mood. They don't tell you about a specific event, but they tell you what the feeling of the time is. I never told her about the Depression. She would have worried. So we don't really know. It's not really telling us about the Depression. It's telling us how the Depression is affecting individuals and relationships between individuals. Come along. We're going to the Trans-Lux to hiss Roosevelt. The Trans-Lux was a famous theater in New York City that showed newsreels, and I just love this. I mean, it tells you how a certain demographic is feeling at this time, and I love the idea. You can't see it, but these women are wearing fur coats, and they're going to go down and hiss something. Now, body language is the bread and butter of cartoonists. As you can see in this 1925 cartoon by Helen Hokinson, Mother, Dorothy, and I have decided to go on the stage this summer. We don't want to get in a rut. And you can see the divide of the generations by the body language. The women on the left have long legs and long arms. They're very leggy and sort of almost in motion, even though they're sitting still. But as opposed to the woman on the right, who is of a previous generation, a Victorian generation, where she's presentational and she's proper. She has no legs. She's not going anywhere. Costume, of course, is really important for a cartoonist to use properly. In this 1970 cartoon, I feel like a damn fool. You can see Misha Richter has shown us the feeling of 1970, how we were all kind of scared of what the changes were after Woodstock. What were you supposed to wear? How was your life supposed to go? And then Bob Weber in this 1977 cartoon uses costume to great comedic effect. I used to be old too, but it wasn't my cup of tea. Now, setting can tell you, it's important to set your cartoon properly, but it tells you a lot about history. In this beautiful 1930 cartoon by Peter Arno, "Good night, Mrs. Parker, it's been perfectly charming." You unfortunately can't see it, but the rug, there's just a few strokes of a pen line on the rug and above the door jamb, and then the butler on the left and the fancy chair on the right all tells you exactly where you are, what this kind of mood was at this time in 1930, and the woman clearly has not behaved properly. And then in this is 1954, I'm Mrs. Edwards M. Barnes, where do I live? This is how people were feeling in 1954 with the sprawling suburbia. Like, what's going to happen to us? We've seen some cartoons about class, but I'm going to show you one that's from 1925 that really shows class starkly. This is Peter Arno, and the man is saying to the man in the manhole, you didn't come across a perfectly ravishing lipstick down there, did you? And you can see how the class is sharply drawn by the man in the manhole. He has no legs. He's not going anywhere. He's stuck in his class. And the man standing is tall and thin and has a slim silhouette. He's got a walking stick, and he's actually more mobile than the man in the manhole. It was nice. Hard times give everyone such a sense of camaraderie. In this Charles Saxon cartoon from 1974, which was during the inflation and the economic crisis of that period. Now, I think we've learned to deal with race a little bit better than we did 86 years ago. This cartoon from 1930, this is her first lynching by Reginald Marsh, 1934, excuse me. I don't know what Marsh had in mind here. He was a very strong artist, socialist realist movement. I wonder if he was getting us to think about our tendencies towards voyeurism ourselves. If she could only cook. This is from 1943, and I wonder what the audience for this cartoon in 1943 was thinking, whether they were laughing at the woman from the leisure class or they were laughing with her. But regardless, it still is a cartoon that is about a construct of a certain time, certain racial construct. We can be thankful we're not in the salad. There were a lot of cartoons in the 50s and 60s about Native peoples. And my interpretation of this is that we were dealing with, this one is from, 1960. We were dealing with, as a country, white people were dealing with the other and trying to cope with the other in our society. Now, you all know that New Yorker has a lot of cartoons about sex and about relationships, right? It's always been the case. But I bet you wouldn't have guessed that in 1928, this woman saying, I don't think he's abnormal, he's just versatile. There were some cartoons in the early times of the magazine that were about homosexuality. It was a different time. And there were also inappropriate cartoons. What do you mean I'm disagreeable? This is from 1929. 1939 cartoon. Now, just how long has this tonsil been bothering you, Miss Lorimer? Yes, we laugh, right? We laugh. And there's something funny about this. However, I feel this cartoon is about power. It's about the power of the man who's a doctor, he's dressed, and the powerlessness of the woman who's naked, and she's drawn in a very realistic way for a cartoon. In the 50s and 60s, there were, read the caption. Did it ever occur to you how you looked to them? In the 50s and 60s, in the 50s and 60s, there were a lot of cartoons about nagging, killjoy wives. And it was a time period when the humor directed at women was at an all-time high. And a lot of the women cartoonists that had existed there in the 20s were disappearing and disappeared altogether in the 60s. I'm not saying the New Yorker kicked them out or anything. I'm just saying that the mood of the country was such that it was not hospitable to their type of humor. And this is my secretary, Miss Foster. This is 54 as well, and again, it's about businessmen having affairs with their secretaries. Makes you kind of proud to be an American, doesn't it? A Peter Arno cartoon from 1960 is about institutional sexism. And then as the relations between the sexes started to change, Princeton, you say? How interesting. I'm a Yale man myself. Women were taking on different roles and doing different things, but it was still about women parroting men in a male-constructed and male-run society. This is 1969. Now I want to talk to you for a few minutes about a cartoonist that I love, that I learned a lot from studying her work. She started the magazine in 1925 at the birth of the magazine, and she became a voice of the urban young woman. Well, of course, I do say I'll never marry, though somehow I've always wanted to be a widow. This could have been drawn last week. I could have done this, right? She was very prolific. My dear, he's absolutely thrilling. Where did you find him? Oh, he's an import. This is the voice of almost of the flapper, the young urban woman in New York. Yes, Jane was stunning, but she's married now. Now this is a multi-panel one if you start in the upper left corner. And you can see, I'll read the caption at the bottom. You're a very intelligent little woman, my dear. And you can see how the man is active, he's mobile, he's moving, and the woman is static and, like some of the other women in the other cartoons, presentational, sort of unable to do anything or not supposed to do anything. So this was Barbara Sherman's voice in the early part of the magazine, the 20s and the early 30s, but her voice began to change. He asked me to marry him, and I evidently must have said yes. After the Depression, and as the country headed towards war, the mood of the country changed, and her work started to change. There was a new cartoon editor in 1939, and she began to use using a gag writer, and her voice, her feminist voice that had been there in the 20s was gone. I told him there are some things I won't do, and going to museums is one of them. How old is a major? These are in the 40s. He's the gentleman who came up to complain about the noise. And you can see there's a gentleman in the background, but this is an example of a cartoon. This was an Esquire in 1945, and the joke is sort of secondary to the fact that she could draw these bodies, these women's bodies, and put them in the forefront. So Barbara Sherman's career changed a lot as the country changed, and she fell victim and she stopped cartooning in the early 60s and then stopped altogether. But things didn't change at the New Yorker after the middle of the decade until the 70s, when the zeitgeist in the country changed, the mood changed, and there was a new cartoon editor in 1974. There was more freedom of expression in the cartoons. It wasn't so status quo as it had been in the 50s and 60s. And it opened up to more voices, different kinds of voices. More women came in to do cartoons. So current trends in the New Yorker now are really less New York-centric and less white male-centric. I think that has a lot to do with the internet and with being more international. I try to stay flexible. I try to listen to myself and listen to my editors and get a sense of what's going on in the world. And I'm going to show you some of my work now. You will find love and happiness and will vote for Fritz Mondale. Now, this is my second cartoon that I sold to the magazine in 1984. It was my first political cartoon. And the country was very, very lukewarm about Fritz Mondale. I feel like fooling around with Radicchio. And then in the 80s, I started to pay attention to the yuppies in the Upper West Side and people's obsession with food. And my voice, the more I drew, the more I listened to my voice, and my women's voices started changing. I don't think I was aware of it at the time, but looking back now, and they became more snarky, more sarcastic. Some wine with your vest? My women were coming out of the closet in a way. That said, there was a feminist backlash, and I could sense that. I was raising two daughters, and I could sense that something was going on, and I did this. Some kids at school called you a feminist, Mom, but I punched them out. After 9/11, I had a lot of trouble drawing cartoons. I did this one, and the New Yorker published it. I was very happy to be able to express myself. Daddy, can I stop being worried now? We all felt this way, I think. We wanted it to end. During the Iraq War, I didn't protest this war, but I'll try to protest the next one. I know that I felt a little guilty I wasn't protesting, and I saw it going on around me. I did a lot of cartoons during the last presidential election, and this one is the one they ran. So you're a Democrat and you won. How does that make you feel? Two women talking, which is not normal. I mean, I could have made it a man and a woman, but I decided, hey, why not two women? And this is my favorite kind of cartoon to do. I never date, I'm too niche. This was done during a time when people were talking in the country about not putting people into categories because of race, gender, or class. And I saw the word niche being bantered about, so I grabbed it and I used it. And this kind of cartoon is about feeling, about mood. It sort of tells us who we are, and in a way that an event might not. So why do we like cartoons so much? They make us laugh, but they also tell us about ourselves, and we love that. But if you look at cartoons through history, you can maybe learn something. You can maybe understand yourself. And I know that I've learned a lot by looking at historical cartoons. Because as the world's changing so fast, I think we're in some ways different than we were 86 years ago. Like the New Yorker, when the New Yorker was born, but some ways we're very, very different. but in some ways we're the same. I'm happy that I have a job and that I can express myself, and people are still searching for who we are and why we do the things we do, and I'm glad that I can contribute to understanding and to laughter, and maybe understand ourselves better and have fun doing it. Thank you.